Hi, this is Dr. Tom Moorcroft. Welcome to Full Cup Life, the podcast that goes behind the science of living well to exposing the truths and tactics to savor all that your journey to greater success has to offer to you every sip of the way.
Hey everybody, Dr. Tom Moorcroft here. So glad you're joining me for the podcast today. I am super stoked because today we're being joined by my good friend, Katie Kimball. She's the national voice for healthy kids eating. She's a blogger, a TEDx speaker, actually multiple TEDx talks. So good. Check them out on YouTube. She's a former teacher and a mom of four who, with her kids, founded the Kids Cook Real Food e-course. And this was recommended by the Wall Street Journal in 2020 as the number one kids cooking class online. Her blog, Kitchen Stewardship, helps families stay healthy without going crazy. She's on a mission to connect families around food and teach every kid to cook as part of her kids' meal revolution. And today, this is just such a cool conversation. We really wanted to focus in on picky eating and how this happens, how to change it, and how to really partner with our kids to help them grow and develop. We focus a bit in on a lot of our kids with autism and pandas who have sensory and food sensory issues and processing issues, which will maybe make, eating and tasting different things from that sensory perspective harder. And we've talked about ways to diffuse this a little bit to really partner with our kids to help them not only start to eat more on their own, but to really start to understand, to start to kind of desensitize themselves. It's really cool. And one of the things that we talked about is the roles that parents play versus the roles that children play in sort of making decisions around mealtime. And a lot of this will go contrary to the things that we learned when we were kids. I mean, I grew up in a different generation where it was just kind of everything that was on our plate was what we were supposed to eat. So in today's podcast, we're going to really go debunk a lot of those myths, give you practical tips to get your kids more excited so that they can not only get healthier now, but learn a lot of life skills. And then towards the end, we're going to really wrap this into how all these skills we learn in the kitchen lead to critical thinking later on down the road. Actually, even now too, but helping them make decisions that go way beyond the kitchen into their greater life as they grow into teenage and adulthood. So join us today. It was an amazing conversation. I'm so happy to share this with you. Awesome. How are you today, Katie?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Dr. Tom.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on here and to be able to chat again. And, I'm just so excited because I think that so many people get used to listening to what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about sort of this mindset of healing, or we're going to be talking about the latest, greatest antibiotic or herbal protocol for treating Lyme and all these other things. But I really am excited to take a step back and share something for our parents to really empower their kids. So that, because one of the biggest foundations of healing is what we put in our mouth. And I really like when I think about who can help our parents, help our kids make better decisions, become less picky in what they eat. I know of no one better. So I'm so happy you're here.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. And that's definitely my mission, is how do we help kids take ownership of their health and understand that what they eat impacts their body, right? We're not taught that in school.
No, I mean, I feel like we're taught the other thing, like the medical system teaches us that we should be more and more reliant on them for our health. And to me, it should be the other way. So the thing that my parents say, there's so many places to start, right? But my moms and my dads, the number one thing they tell me is that their kids just will only eat like 3 things. Mm. So why are our kids become so picky? And then, what are the things that we can do to kind of get, help move out of that place?
Okay. So you just asked like an hour-long 2-part question.
Perfect.
We'll keep it a little shorter than that. First, you're talking about, and I think this is fascinating, why are we seeing an increase in picky eating? What is going on in the world and in society? And I think part of it, it's multifaceted. Part of it is we're seeing a lot more sensory processing issues, right, in our kids. And I think that has other like environmental toxicity factors, right? That we're like our senses are turned up too high. And when that happens, food is a big deal. Textures are all driving our kids crazy, right? And seasoning are driving the kids crazy. And so if you have a sensory processing issue in the kids, that's going to increase picky eating. And we're seeing sensory processing issues go up, I think, because of toxins in our world. So there's part of it, right? There's this physiological part. I also think what a lot of parents maybe don't understand is that picky eating is not all about the food. In fact, food is one of the last pieces of the puzzle that exacerbates picky eating. It's really about a relationship. It's about relationships between the parent and the child. It's about relationships between the child and the food, but it's not usually about the actual food. And so parents say, I can't get my kids to eat anything. And in that sentence is the problem. It is not our job to get our kids to eat. It's a lose-lose situation, because here's the thing. Kids figure out very quickly in toddlerhood that we actually can't make them chew their food. We can't move their jaw. We cannot make them swallow food. And so the moment we try, we enter into an unwinnable power struggle. And
it's like a control,
I believe those power
right?
struggles. What's that?
It's like control. I mean, I think of my PANS kids. They feel like they've lost so much control over their body, and this is one place they can exert control over the situation.
Yep. Eating, sleeping, and pooping. Those are the three things that parents cannot make their kids do. And those are the three biggest power struggles in parenting, right? And so, and then we get all anxious about it, right? When we have picky eaters. Like I've never heard a parent say, not joking, oh my gosh, my 4-year-old is not potty trained. He is literally going to go to college in diapers, right? We say that as a jest, but we don't actually believe it. And yet, when it comes to eating, we do say that. We say, oh, my 4-year-old won't eat anything green. This will never change. And so that mindset is toxic, to think that there isn't going to be growth, right? So, the root cause, to start at the base and the foundation of picky eating challenges, is number one, parents, we've got to believe that our kids will change, their palate will change, they will grow, and their relationship with food can improve. That's huge. And number two, we've got to understand our lanes. Okay. So real quick, Ellen Satter has created something called the division of responsibility. And this is so freeing for parents to understand that the child's job, parent's job first. The parent's job is to decide what is served, what we eat, when food is served, and where food is served, right? Dinner is at 6 o'clock. We're sitting at the table, and this is what I'm serving. That's where your responsibility ends. You are not responsible to get your child to eat or make your child to eat, or whatever language you're using. You don't have to do that. Take the weight off your shoulders. It is the child's responsibility, whether they eat at all and how much. And everything goes better when the child stays in their lane and the adult stays in their lane, which means, right, if the child, the adult's supposed to be responsible for what is served. So if we're asking our kids, what do you want? Oh, what do you want for dinner? What will you eat? That's giving them too much responsibility. It's errant responsibility. That is the adult's job, right? And if in the reverse, if the adult's saying, you must eat these 3 bites, eat these 5 bites, you have to taste, you have to, you're leaving your lane. That is the child's responsibility. And if you just kind of straighten that out at the table, massive changes result.
Now, this is really interesting because I'm flashing back to when my little black doggy Labrador mix when I was younger turned me into my parents, because they were doing like the canned peas thing. I'm like, you have to eat everything, clear your plate, Thomas. And I'm like putting the stuff under the table to the dog, and he's eating it and eating it and eating it. And it was so bad that the dog was dropping it on the floor and stuff, right?
Oh, no.
And so the dog turned me in, when I don't blame him, because it didn't taste good. And so, I mean, I feel like what you're saying totally resonates with what I know is right, but it also flies in the face of a lot of what we're taught growing up. And a lot of us who are parents at this time, we grew up in a society that said the parents are responsible for what, when, where, and how much you eat, and whether you eat or not. They're responsible for everything. So how can we support our parents in making the shift, right? Because I think that so many of them are like, my kid needs to eat this, and they have to eat this much. Otherwise, like, where's that come from? I mean, is it just like we're in charge of our kids and we have to dictate everything, or?
Well, we feel responsible, right? We like, absolutely. First of all, yes, the clean plate club is what I call it, was huge when our generation was kids and the generation before that. And for whatever reason, that didn't cause a lot of picky eating, but that caused a lot of really disordered relationships with food, right? Where we're not listening to our bodies because our parents made us clean our plate. They made us eat when we weren't hungry, or eat when we were too full. And so we see a lot of problems in the adult population now because we have that disordered relationship with food. We don't know how to listen to our body's cues of hunger. So I mean, how do we get parents to stop doing it? Just stop it. Just stop it. Like, don't do it. It's because number one, it's not going to work. You're seeing that it's not working. You're frustrated already, right? Or you wouldn't be feeling like you had a picky eating challenge. And number two, like, well, it's not going to work. Really. Like, when we have to teach our kids, what do we want? Do we want to be following our kids to college, standing over them and instructing them on what to eat? No, we want to raise them to be able to have a good relationship with food. And so I think most parents would say, oh yeah, that is my goal. I didn't even realize I was doing it wrong. Right. And so I hear from a lot of parents, I teach this in like a challenge structure, and I'll hear from people who will say, oh my goodness, like, you told me don't tell them to eat. And I didn't believe it. And I didn't think I could do it. And I thought this would be really hard. And I like forced myself to walk away physically and go to the kitchen and leave the little platter of vegetables out and not say anything. And I didn't think it would work. And it did. My kid picked up a pea pod and took a bite out of it. Or my kid ate half the carrots, or, like, there's a whole range of what does success look like. But the kids feel better. That's my favorite part, is when the moms say, you know what? I saw the stress leave the face of my child. Right? And kids can even articulate that. They'll say, this felt better. Dinner felt better. I liked dinner today. The experience, not even the food, right? Because when the stress of the pressure to eat leaves the table, it changes everything. And it works.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because so many of our patients who we're like, here, take these medicines, take these supplements. We have them on this structured pathway, and to just make one more thing, because so many people are like, hey, my kids have food sensitivities or this or that. It's really interesting to me, because now that I'm thinking about what you just said, was I have a lot of people where their kids have to be gluten or dairy free. And some of these kids, not all, but some of these kids are the happiest kids I've ever met around food, because I feel like they're doing, when I'm Rolodexing through what they say, is like, hey, the parents are like, this is what you have to eat. And then here it is on the table, because that's all there is. It's interesting. And so the stress level, I think, is really, that's so key. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it is. And I mean, we know, like, when we think about the sympathetic and parasympathetic state, not only is being in the parasympathetic state crucial for your child having a good relationship with food and feeling like they have some power, some agency, some control over things, right? Which we like as humans, but it's also crucial physiologically, right? We're not, if you're making your kid eat those 3 bites of broccoli, the really sad end of the story, like, even if you feel like it worked because the broccoli went in, because they're feeling stress and pressure, their body is not going to digest and actually assimilate the nutrients from the broccoli. So you lose anyway. Like, it's forcing kids to eat is a lose all around.
Right.
And giving them that little bit of choice and control and agency, it's amazing the impact it makes on kids.
That's awesome. So we give them the we tell them what, when, and where, and then we just let them eat or not eat and choose how hungry they are in a particular day, which to me just seems brilliant, because I mean, we have all these people who overeat now because we told them to clean their plate, I guess. What's the next step? I mean, how do we give even more control and agency? How do we get the kids to actually get into the kitchen with us?
Yeah, because if you want to talk about having a relationship with food without pressure to eat, the table's not actually the best place, because the kids probably, if you've had sort of that power struggle over food, the kids come to the table expecting it. That's the habit. And so even if you start to change, it can be tricky for them to kind of jolt their brains out of it. So the best place to interact with food, to become friends with those vegetables is the kitchen, because there isn't pressure to eat, right? The environment is different. And so when kids are part of making the meal, there's so much cool brain science that happens to help picky eating. So first of all, there's a bit of a sensory inoculation that happens when you are smelling, touching, maybe licking fingers, right? Because kids are gross and they will, and we should go, yay, that's okay, right? They're gonna get this little inoculation of senses in a way where, especially for those kids who are over sensing, for whom food is very strong flavors. And that's part of why they might be a little bit of a picky eater, right? That can reduce some of that over sensing because they've already been exposed to it. So that's excellent. Also, as human beings, we don't like open loops. And when we start something, we have this sense that we want to finish it. And so, unconsciously, subconsciously, kids who are part of making a meal feel invested in it. They feel some ownership in it. And they also feel like they started it and they kind of want to be part of finishing it. So they're more likely, it's not magic pixie dust, they're more likely to taste that meal because they were invested in it, because they had some ownership in it. And so it's very, very beautiful. Plus, kids like choice, right? So number three, if kids are part of the beginning of the meal, part of making choices about what is served. And again, I know I just said division of responsibility, like don't ask the kids what they want. However, right, within us creating some boundaries, right? We're going to eat a vegetable at this meal. What do you think? Broccoli or green beans? Okay. That's like an acceptable choice to give the kids because we are still creating the boundaries. But when kids are, again, part of like making the choices, I know my two older kids have made dinner once a week for 3 years now, which, by the way, parents, is a pretty awesome side effect of teaching your kids to cook. You might get a meal off, but they love being able to make those choices, right? They for sure are going to choose a meal that they like and they'll be invested in it. And so that's, they're at least once a week, they're going to have a meal that they love. And so choice, that little sort of physical sensory inoculation and the closing the open loop are all really powerful factors in helping kids have that better relationship with food at the table that starts in the kitchen.
I love it. It's funny. The thing with our daughter, Talia, is I see her really just taking ownership and being really excited to volunteer to make different meals. Not always the one, again, it's not the one I'm choosing. It's really that it's like she has an idea and let her roll with it, or she'll come in halfway through and say, how can I help? I see her volunteering more and more for things outside of the kitchen, like both with us and out in life, and I think a lot of it stems from the kitchen stuff. Awesome. I think I heard you say, let our kids play with food.
Yeah, absolutely. Let kids play with food. Sure. That's an excellent sort of picky eating intervention because again, there's no pressure to eat. So you can have like mashed potato exploration day or whatever, instead of getting out Play-Doh, you get out some mashed potatoes and just let them, draw in the mashed potatoes with a pretzel stick or whatever. That any kind of interaction with food when there's no pressure to eat, again, serves as sort of that inoculation and that just being able to have a relationship with food. I love that you mentioned that your daughter has some of that motivation to come into the kitchen. And we just started the school year here, to give some context. And I have a middle school daughter. So if any of you remember being a middle school girl or have a middle school girl, it's rough. You feel like everyone is watching you all the time. That's just, you were never a middle school girl, Tom, but I was. And I remember that feeling. And my daughter was so stressed about school lunches. She did not want to look different. She doesn't want people to watch her eat. And it was a huge source of stress coming in. So the weekend before school started, she said, Mom, I want to have food that looks like what other people are eating, but I want it to be healthy. So I made this list of things I'm going to make this weekend. And she made homemade granola bars. She made a bunch of like energy balls. She made homemade gelatin with 100% fruit juice. And so what she packs for lunch is way too small. It's not very balanced. And I have to remember my lane, right? and not ask her, how much did you eat? Are you getting enough? And so I've decided that for me, school time lunch can't be a battleground. I'm just going to let her do her thing. And I'm glad she's at least getting, some fat and some nutrient density. And I just tell her, just try to make sure that breakfast and after school snack are giving you some nourishment. And then I, kind of peek over like, okay, she's got a nice big after school snack. That's good. I don't have to worry, because we worry that our little babies are undernourished. That's why we enter those power struggles, because we want to fix it. But sometimes we have to choose, right? We have to just let some things go and realize that when they have, especially as a middle schooler, she's 4 years away from leaving my house, 5 years away from leaving my house. I've got to start giving her, right? I've got to start giving her independence that she wants and that she needs and that she deserves. And so, it's this crazy process of just releasing the control in their lives. And I hope I'm doing it right. I don't know for sure.
Well, it's interesting though, because I find that like Talia is very motivated to show off her skills to her friends. So she wants her lunch to kind of be like other people's, but at the same time, she likes to show off a little and say, look what I made. And I eat stuff that other people don't eat. And then she's like, my friends want me to bring them some. I'm like, nice. Okay. I remember like, we were talking about a year and a half ago, and I was just like, Talia's always been really into the food thing, but it was like, but getting her into the kitchen, it was like, she'd have times where she was all gung ho and other times where she seemed apparently totally disinterested in participating, because I want to teach her to be able to do this so that Jill and I don't have to cook every meal, and so that she's prepared. What are the tips and tricks to actually get your kids to come into the kitchen and work with you without it becoming sort of, because to me, that's another power struggle. It's like, here, you must eat this and you must help me. It's like, it's just like, you must do the dishes, or whatever, clean up.
How did you know my kids hate doing dishes?
Right? I don't know.
That's the worst. They fight over who has to get stuck with the dishes as far as after meal chores. It's bad. No, but so how do we motivate without creating another power struggle? That's a great question. And I'm thinking about one of our members at Kids Cook Real Food, Kara, and you would love her story because she has a lot of chronic health issues, and Lyme might even be on her list. So she's learned through like experience and asking questions and pushing against the mainstream a little bit that for her, food, what she eats, is the most important way to feel better in the face of all her chronic illnesses. And she still, and she has a lot of chronic fatigue. So some days it's like really hard for her to even get off the couch, but she looked at her 4 kids. I think they're aged like 3 to 10 or so. And she thought, gosh, they've got my genetics. And it was so important for her that her kids knew how to make real food for themselves. So she like powered through the fatigue. She used our classes. And what she teaches me watching her is that humility in the parent is a huge piece, because they're like the very first class, she said, well, one mom yelled, one kid cried, one mom apologized, and the toast got a little burned. So like it didn't start out super hot, but I think she showed a lot of humility with her kids. Like, this is hard for me and I'm learning with you, and then making it fun. The rest, her pictures after the first day, always smiling kids, feeling good about themselves. Like kids like to help. They like to do authentic tasks. It feels really, really good to do something that's not for a participation medal, right? To do something that can really serve your family. So part of the motivation is just getting them started a little bit. Like I like to tell parents, if you have like a 3-year-old and you think, well, my 3-year-old can't make dinner, they can't do anything. Teach your 3-year-old to measure a teaspoon of salt and to measure it well. And then you can let that 3-year-old start to measure some of the seasonings, because they're definitely motivated at that age. Let them start measuring some of the seasonings. And then when you eat the meal, right? So they've measured the salt and maybe the basil. And when you eat your lovely Italian meal, you say, oh, this is so good. Everyone, guess who helped make this taste so good? Right. And that fills the cup. It fills the cup of the 3-year-old who only has one skill he or she can do. but now they're going to be more motivated to come back because confidence feels good.
Right. And I think the thing that's so cool about that is like, you can play it up and really point out and highlight what they've done, but it's not like baloney, right? Like kids know their baloney indicator is or their bullshit indicator, to be completely clear. They know when you're just, patronizing them. But if it's like, they really get motivated by this. And I think it's a great idea, because the more you see it, the better it is. And I remember a couple of years ago, Talia went to a ski class, an all-day ski class, so they get meals with it, right? And at the end of the day, the instructor comes up to us and they go, I've never seen this, but your daughter ordered a pomegranate and strawberry salad with grilled chicken, and all the other kids were having corn dogs. They're like, and it was like, she was just like, corn dogs aren't real food.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I think that's the thing, is like, the more you work on all the tips that you're giving us, Katie, they're the ones. I guess what I'm saying is, it's not instant gratification necessarily. It's you're building them up over time. Are there like age groups where certain things are better or worse to try and do? Like, I know like my daughter was stoked when I shared the knife with her, right? So, but if we're taking the 3-year-old and we're letting them do the measuring, what's our next level, to get them going?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the knives, because that's another motivator, right? When we raise the bar.
Especially if you're a boy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, knives and fire, like that's what freaks the parents out. And so we tend to be hesitant at times of letting our kids get in the kitchen. But again, like, you win more when you let your kids do more and you just teach it in safe ways. So, I'm thinking of a kindergarten teacher, Lenora, who had her kindergartners cutting up raw chicken for homemade chicken nuggets in like a classroom situation.
But you can also get all the nasty germs, huh?
I know, right? I get a little afraid of like raw meat and stuff, but
I'm all for it. But I'm thinking what people are thinking now, right?
I know. But kids love that, right? Kids love when we raise the bar and give them things to do that are beyond common cultural expectations. Right. So my son, John, he just turned 10. And when he was 7, he actually approached me and said, Mom, I think I'm ready for the bigger knife. Right. So we taught him how to use a sharp knife, a small one first, because that's the logical progression, right? You start with a butter knife, you move to a paring knife, then you move to a chef's knife. And so he'd been doing paring knife and like cucumbers and zucchini, kind of that like less dense foods for about a year. And he said, I think I'm ready for the big knife, Mom. Like, he asked me, and he articulates things so well. Sometimes he said, I like that I know how to cook, because most of my friends don't. Right. And that feels cool.
Wow.
So what a huge motivator to be like, I am above the expectation. I'm above my cohort group. And so far, if I get my way, all the kids will have knives in their hands, and then that won't be a motivating factor. But for now, still a motivating factor for y'all.
Right. Well, so, I kind of hear that like there's like, we keep kind of going off of in the kitchen and at the table to this bigger thing called life. What's your experience been teaching all these kids for so long, and these parents? Like, how does this transform people beyond the kitchen?
So powerfully. At Kids Cook Real Food, we talk about connection, confidence, and creativity as being the benefits of teaching your kids to cook, right? Just like with picky eating, it's not all about the food. We think it is. The food is just what we have to do 3 to 5 times a day, but the experience is so much more. And so we see families bonding over food, right? And connecting with their kids. And you have those conversations that you don't often have because everyone's working and everyone's busy and you're not making eye contact. And so you hear about their day better. And the confidence, the confidence is what our members say is the biggest and most surprising benefit. They didn't see it coming. But parents will tell me, like, I see this confidence in my daughter that I've never seen before, or I see my son is so confident, and it's actually, like you said, sort of spilling out into real life, because confidence cannot stay, in one category. Right. If you feel more confident, it's just is contagious to the rest of your life. And so we see it, we really, really see that. And then creativity. It is so fun for me when parents share pictures. I remember one little girl, Lori is the mom's name, and her daughter was so creative. And she would go out to the garden and she'd pick like dandelion greens out of the lawn, and she'd go pick fresh produce in the garden and just create these soups. I don't think they always turned out delicious, but they always increased her confidence and her creativity. Right. And it was also practical,
Right.
because sometimes creativity is just messy. It's just glitter all over the house. but in this way,
Glitter.
when kids are like think about it. You're a 10-year-old kid and you're taking a recipe that an adult wrote and you shift it a little bit and you tweak it for what you want. Holy cow. How can that not infuse creativity and confidence into that child?
Yeah, it's crazy because I, as you're saying this, I'm remembering all the crazy concoctions that Talia makes, and I'm just like, and some of them are just god awful, horrible, but most of them are pretty good, and they might have a spice tuned up a little too much or a little too little, but it's amazing, like you said, like how much our kids can actually do. And, when you give them the opportunity, when you really give them that ability to soar. And one of the things I just want to point out, because I'm a bit, to a lot of our parents who have especially teens, is our kids are always paying attention and looking to us for guidance, even when they're flipping us the bird as a 13-year-old, right? So they're always looking up to us. We have so much influence. So when you were talking about taking an adult recipe and tweaking it a little, that's what I do, right? Like I literally will look at a recipe and I think of it as an ingredient list, and then I just pick and choose what I want, and I don't even pay attention to how they do it, and I cook. And then Jill's like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And I'm so excited about it. And I tell why I did this and that. And then so Talia starts to do the same thing. And if I allow her to go and do that, I give her that creativity and that confidence. But on the flip side, if I go, hey, no, you should do it this way, I just contradict what I just told everybody is the way I succeeded at something. And that just kind of was really struck me, Kate, as you said that. It's just, I think it's important to understand that we're not always going to be successful, and our kids aren't always going to be successful, but it's more than the enjoyment of the effort. So I just love that point and wanted to just like kind of highlight it for everybody.
Well, and there's room for both. There's room for structure and flexibility, right? There's room for following the directions exactly. And there's room for opening the fridge and going, what can I make up? And that is the beauty of the kitchen, right? Is that you've got your engineer brains and you've got your artist brains. And we know, and we've got kids who get so stressed out if you say don't use measuring cups and spoons. Parents too, adults too,
right?
And then we've got kids who feel so confined if they have to measure everything. And so what a great arena to teach any life skill you can possibly think of that fits every personality trait, right? So, at Kids Cook Real Food, we teach the kids to follow the recipe very exactly. And then we teach them to mess it up, so that they can have both and.
Oh, that's awesome. Because right. And it's like funny, in our house, we talk about how the recipe is so important. If you're baking.
Yes.
And if you're cooking, it may be a little more flexibility, but it's interesting to we do a lot of take the recipe. It's amazing. It's exactly the way you said it. We do it once the way it's supposed to be, and then we do it our way, and we compare and contrast. And I feel like a lot for the sensory kids, the ability to put your hands in and make it, and then desensitize a little, but then, like you said, they're going to put their fingers in their mouth and everything, and they're going to learn. So they're going to have this full on experience that they own. It's just so brilliant. And the conversation where we're going in terms of like the life skills is another piece that I know that you're super passionate about, as am I, is, I'm always wanting, and my wife's always wanting, to allow our daughter to become herself, not like just like another mini Tom or mini Jill. And I want to really teach her critical thinking out in the real world, because so many people are just like, acting like drones these days. It's crazy. I said it, I know. But so how do you take these skills and then really just go out into the world and develop critical thinking skills for our kids?
Yeah, critical thinking. Gosh, it's so important. It's so important. And so you mentioned that kids watch us. that we model for our kids, whether we like it or not, whether we're trying to or not,
Right.
they are watching our model. And that's where I think it's really kind of fascinating when you think about critical thinking, because people say, well, kids' brains aren't fully developed, so they can't actually be critical thinkers. Like they don't have the prefrontal cortex to do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm a questioner. So I usually look at things and say, that's probably not the full truth. There's got to be something we can do, right? Well, and so that's what I believe is we can lay this amazing foundation so that our kids can become critical thinkers when their prefrontal cortex catches up, right? So we've got to model and teach our kids how to question, how to be curious. And they start out curious, right? So we just have to not lock that down. We just have to not tell them to be quiet when they're asking questions. We've got to let those questions flow and model that we continue to ask questions too. And of course, food is a wonderful platform to do that, because you can talk about marketing. You can watch a commercial and say, what do you guys think about what that commercial just said? You know, and what are they doing to make that food look so good? Gosh, that's one thing my 13-year-old daughter, Leah, has learned. She'll get on Pinterest and look up recipes and, oh, it looks so good. It looks so good. And then sometimes she makes the recipe and it doesn't taste good. It's right. It's not always in the beauty of a professional, professionally framed picture.
Right.
And what a way to apply to life, right? Things are not always as they look.
And there's food artists. Like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like airbrushing your food.
Yeah, totally. So I teach my kids to be questioners, to always look deeper and deeper and ask why many times.
Right.
I think it's important to teach our kids to be adaptable. You know, that story of Kara, how she didn't do so well teaching her kids. And then, for the kids to see us apologize, for the kids to see us say, boy, I didn't do that correctly, or I thought something was A and it actually was B and I was wrong. And I'm going to change. So I really think that kids need to see us sort of being adaptable, and they need to learn to be adaptable. I know Dr. Ryan Wolfert, who is a chiropractor here in Michigan with me. He always talks about how we don't want to do the same things all the time. You should flip your toilet paper around, and you should switch around where you sit at the dinner table. So just to continue to build new neural pathways. And we got to teach our kids that when things go wrong, when things aren't the way they want them to be, how can we adapt? How can we be resilient? And then resilience is for me something that I want to build like a muscle for my kids. It's because it takes practice. It takes practice to be the person who's different. It takes practice to be the person who stands firm in their convictions when the rest of the world might be going other directions. And so, eating real food, caring about our health, understanding that food impacts the way we feel and food sensitivities are real, etc. Right? This is countercultural. And so I love to point out to my kids, right? The Kimballs use stainless steel water bottles. And we look at other people using all their or disposable junk. And we talk about, why do we do this? Why are we different? What are they doing to the earth? Look at that litter. We're going to pick up that litter that other people threw down. And so for me, you're creating a family identity and giving your kids deep roots and also a little bit of padding, right? They know who they are. They know their family loves them. That happens at the dinner table because we build those bonds. That happens in the kitchen because we're connecting with each other and we're giving them, a little bit of power, a little bit of control over their lives. And so what does that do? That creates the good kind of bubble wrap, right? We live in a society where we're trying to helmetize and bubble wrap our kids and protect them from everything. That's not what we should do. We shouldn't remove the problems or remove the any danger. We need to give our kids resilience so that when bad things happen, because they will, they have the roots of their family. They know they are loved. They've taken some blows before. They've felt what it feels like to fail. They've felt what it feels like to be going against the flow, and they're stronger for it.
It's so badass. I mean, it's just great because I'm just thinking the resilient kid. I mean, it's I know a lot of my patients, they're sending their kids out in the world and they're so afraid of them cheating or not following the thing because it's this structured thing. And I see in Talia, she has a pride. And I was just thinking she knows so much about the animals that are impacted by the little plastic around the soda cans or even the sparkling water cans. But she's so into the seals and the penguins and everything. But the kids are innately in tune with nature, and they understand that throwing crap out the window is not okay.
Yeah.
Yet if we do it, then we set them up for that. So, I mean, I just love the resilience conversation, because then you go out in the world and, hey, I mean, I guess I have a question. What do you do when you find your kid, not, maybe like an example, like I went in one day and I found candy under the pillowcase.
Yeah. Right? Been there.
Right. What's the reaction that our parents should be having in these scenarios?
Sure. I mean, kids are going to push the boundaries, right? That's literally their job description. And so for me, it depends on the age. If you've got a kid who's 5, 7, probably even up to 8 or 9, I mean, it's a discipline situation to me. And again, this may not be right, but when I found my first grader with a sucker in bed after I had tucked him in, I went in to like tell him something else, and he was literally had a sucker and he popped it out and sort of tried to put it under the sheet with that magical thinking, like maybe she didn't see it. I just started cracking up. I started laughing, so I was so surprised. And then yes, we found all the wrappers like under the bed and stuff. And so my reaction to that scenario was to take the candy away. You don't get it, but also to have conversation, right? Yeah. So for me, it's always there's a balance between the discipline of the consequence and the discipline of the teaching, because discipline comes from the word to teach, right? And so we talk about, well, why would you do that? Kids never know why. Why would you not want to do that? So you talk about cavities, you talk about trust, really. For me, that's where it comes down to. If they're sneaking food, it's a trust issue. And so you have to set up the environment. And we've changed our dessert strategies a lot over the years. A lot. Right now, our current dessert strategy is that each kid gets one dessert a day and they can eat it whenever they want. Cool. And that's, it's a little bit, it's sort of balanced. Like some people say you should never have any restrictions on dessert. I just can't do that. Even though I know like some of the experts recommend it, I just can't quite do that. But we don't have restrictions on the when. So we don't set the kids up to see dessert as like the trophy you get after you finish your meal.
Exactly.
That can definitely set up some disordered eating habits. And they have like a budget, right? So it kind of teaches them budgeting. Like, when do I want to use my dessert? What's going to happen during the day? And so that's a life skill too, right? Planning ahead and future casting and stuff like that. So that's what we do right now. That's not what we did when I found the kid with all the candy. We were more restrictive. So the more restrictive you are, the more kids are going to push. So that's why you got to kind of have that balance.
Yeah. It's almost like the Tai Chi. It's like the harder you push, the harder you're going to fall.
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think I just, using all of the tools that you teach, I've just seen, and it jives so much with the way Jill and I do things. It really helps Talia grow into this really like a woman at this point. I mean, she's 11 and she can cook. I mean, she could literally make a meal all day long. And the one other thing that you reminded me of just now was there was one time where she wanted her dessert early and she had it early. And then after dinner, we had dessert, but her budgeted dessert had already been had. And that critical thinking that we teach kids. I mean, I think like we've been talking, they're capable of so much more than we believe. And it's not just prefrontal cortex less developed. I mean, the sky is the limit, man. You give these little kids the opportunity to grow. And so I just appreciate all that you're teaching everyone to do that. So as we kind of wrap the conversation up, is there anything in terms of like critical thinking and getting our kids out of picky eating that you want to make sure that we leave people with, especially kind of coming, knowing the chronic illness kids who might be, they might be picky for multiple reasons.
Sure. What do we need to be as parents that we didn't know? We didn't know we were signing up to be detectives when we decided to have children, right? But that's what we need to be. We need to be detectives. We need to ask, what's the root of this behavior, right? What's the root of this food sensitivity? And that modeling is what's going to help our kids, right, grow to understand their own bodies. That's our goal. That's our goal, is to help the kids understand their own bodies. And so when we can question what's going on and dig deeper, it takes time. And so we all feel like we're running out of time and we don't have enough. But this is what is worth investing your time in. It's raising kids who are going to be healthy, independent adults. And so if we can do that, if we can teach them to connect food to how they feel, and teach them to take some ownership in their health, there's no easy path, but it's a worthwhile path.
Nice. I love it. And all this while getting to hang out and spend more time with our kids while we're doing the other things we need to do, which is make dinner.
Exactly. There's a practical element in a big way.
I love it. Yeah. Any excuse to spend more time with my family, I'll take in my busy life. So, hey, Katie Kimball, thank you so much for joining us. Just as a reminder to everybody, Katie is a mom of 4 kids who founded Kids Cook Real Food e-course. And this was recommended in 2020 by the Wall Street Journal as the best online cooking class for kids. So check out the show notes because we're going to have links to all of that. And Katie, thanks again for taking the time out to share this with everyone.
Oh, it was great. It was great. We'll make sure that your kids have a fuller cup, that your listeners have a fuller cup.
Right on. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. Don't miss out on a single thing. Subscribe to our podcast and then join me at tommoorcroft.com.